Senator Parrott, Senator Webb, Senator Wise, Representative Fugit, Representative Harris,
Here.
Representative Heverin,
Present.
Representative Huff,
Here.
Representative Miller, Representative Rowland, Representative Sims,
Present from the 70th District.
thank you, Senator Humphreys, Senator McDaniel, Representative Reed,
Here in the room.
Representative Rudy, Representative Upchurch,
Here in the room.
Co-Chair Santoro,
Here in the room.
Chair Higdon.
Here in the room. If anyone comes in late on the video conference, please let us know and we'll count you as present. We do have a quorum, and I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from our August meeting. We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The minutes are approved. With us today, our first presenter, Secretary of Transportation, Jim Gray. Mr. Secretary, welcome to our committee, the Budget Review Subcommittee on Transportation. We're delighted to have you with us today. If you would, for the record, please identify yourself, and the floor is yours, Mr. Secretary.
Well, thank you, Senator. My name is Jim Gray, and I am the Secretary of Transportation. First things first, let me thank Chairman Higdon and Co-Chair Senator Representative Santoro. I appreciate both of you and the way that we have been able to work together. Let me say that I also look forward to the time in the hopefully not too distant future where we can be back in the room together with you all. So you know that in the overall context of things, you all know that we've gone through some real challenging times, both with the general fund and with the transportation budget. But you also know, too, that in times of adversity, the human spirit triumphs. It does not fail us, and that's what we're seeing. If you were calling the roll, Senator, I was thinking that I myself have had conversations with many of the members who are present today and are engaged. And when I think of the engagement that we have throughout the cabinet with the members of the General Assembly, it's rewarding to know that business is getting done. And frankly speaking, there are many times that the work of the cabinet is as efficient as any operation that I've ever been myself engaged with. And I want to express my thanks to all the members of the cabinet, all the employees throughout the state, the more than 4,000 employees throughout the state that are on call, that are present, accounted for, and are doing their job every single day. I also want to take a minute to introduce a new addition, who is actually someone that is an alum of the cabinet, but he's back in a role here, and that is James Ballinger. James is on with us today, and I just want to introduce him. He is the newly appointed state highway engineer, and James comes to us with a long record and a history with the cabinet. He was a scholarship student, and came into the cabinet through that route, which is a tried and tested route. And his role before a few years ago was District 7 Chief District Engineer. And I got to work with him in that role when I was mayor, and I was so impressed with him. But James comes to this job with enormous experience, both in the public sector and the private sector. And just to get a sense of the significance of his role within the cabinet, more than 4,000, roughly 4,300 employees total. More than 3,500 are in the highway department. So James Ballinger has the responsibility for, across the state, more than 3,500 employees. And that includes all 12 districts that many of you all are involved in, of course. So, James, I just want, you said you wanted to say hello to folks, so please do.
Well, Secretary Gray, first of all, I want to thank you for providing me this opportunity to serve as the state highway engineer. And I'm looking forward to working with the members of the legislature and the budget review subcommittee on transportation. So, as you guys have questions or things, we'll be happy to work together, and just looking forward to this opportunity. Thank you, Secretary Gray.
Oh, thanks, James. And I may lean on you when we get some questions. So, thank you. So let me launch now into get going into the presentation specifically that you all asked us to address. And I'm also joined by Robin Brewer, our budget director. And Robin has a segment in our presentation today as well. So I've been asked to speak with you today on three questions. And the first relates to the SHIFT program, the highway project process, the actual process that we engage in implementing projects throughout the cabinet, and specifically the SHIFT model, the SHIFT program in particular, whether you ask whether or not it's going to be continued or replaced with something else. So let's move to the first slide. Thank you so much. Now, as I think most of you know, SHIFT was launched 3 years ago as a data-driven method for setting priorities for our road and bridge projects. Now, the acronym SHIFT stands for Strategic Highway Investment for Tomorrow. Formula for tomorrow. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. All right. So the SHIFT model actually uses data such as crashes, fatalities, traffic volume, traffic delay time, likely economic impact, uses all of these as influencers to help in assessing the benefits of a planned project and deciding where it should rank among our priorities. And that's a good and thoughtful way of approaching any planning project. We want always to be investing wisely. And it's especially important, of course, in times like these, times of adversity. It's important that we get the maximum value, the best value for every taxpayer dollar that we spend. So SHIFT is a good tool for helping us do that. I've been favorably impressed with it. And we will keep using this tool, but like any other good tool, it has to be employed with good judgment. And it needs to follow and allow for input from multiple sources or multiple quarters. And we'll talk about that now. This is not an automatic system, and our planners are not on autopilot. Let me say that again. This is not an automatic system, and our planners are not on autopilot. There are going to be times when judgment and discretion will be exercised. And that's the way both the cabinet and the legislature have employed the SHIFT model so far. That's the way that it's been employed. Now let's go to the next slide. This slide is titled Where Project Proposals Come From. One of the main features of the SHIFT model, the SHIFT program, is that project ideas and priorities will, in a sense, bubble up from the grassroots of local planning. And that includes area development districts, metropolitan planning organizations, and our 12 highway districts, among others, and including you all, legislators. And I'm going to come back to that a little later in my comments in my presentation. So, you know, if you were a complete stranger to the transportation planning process, you likely would, and frankly, you would be impressed by such a collaborative and responsive approach. I will tell you that I have been. You would think this is how planning actually should be, how good planning should occur, reflecting the local needs and local priorities. But in fact, what you as legislators legislators already know, and I think you can appreciate well, planning has always actually bubbled up this way. You know, too, that it's not the only way a project can end up in the state highway plan. For example, some projects arise internally from our own engineers, professionals, where, for example, the greatest maintenance needs occur and we try to address. Either way, there's a general flow to project development from planning through all the various pre-construction activities and then to construction. So let's go to the next slide now. Okay, now this is a dense chart. It's Byzantine, but let me tell you, we're going to go into some detail on it. But this is the diagram, a flow diagram that our project management staff uses to illustrate the project workflow. Now, let's break it down into core pieces. The next slide, please. Now, remember, you all asked me to do this, Senator Higdon and Representative Santoro. So as we go through process diagrams, forgive me, all right? But this illustrates that everything begins on the left with planning, defining a problem and what's needed in order to get it fixed, putting together the team, beginning to engage the public, the early environmental work, and preliminary design. And so you'll see that flow to preliminary design. The next slide, please. Then we get into more of the real work on the ground. The National Environmental Policy Act of 1970, that's NEPA, the checkpoint. It shows it in the upper left hand, that process, and then acquiring the right-of-way, utility relocation, and then final design work. Actually, often, many times, it takes multiple years. As you know this too, it takes multiple years and have gone into a project before the public actually ever sees earth-moving equipment on a work site. Okay, the next slide. Now, finally, this diagram illustrates the construction phase, follow-through, project follow-through. And afterward, the action shift to maintenance. All right. There's another factor in setting transportation priorities, and it wasn't on my slide. And I talked about it earlier. But that's something that we are keenly aware of, and that's the fact that the highway plan must be enacted by you, by the members of the Kentucky General Assembly. We in the Transportation Cabinet submit a plan to you on behalf of the governor. And at that point, the legislative process takes over. Now, it may surprise some folks who don't follow events in Frankfurt all that closely that the highway plan gets introduced as a bill. It goes through the same process as any other bill before the legislature. And that's to say that it undergoes public hearings and multiple committee meetings in both chambers. It gets robustly discussed and examined, and it gets amended. You as legislators can add or remove projects. You know that you can change the project timeline, the project schedule, so that one project may be advanced or another may be delayed. The highway plan bill may go through many changes before a final version is agreed to by both the House and the Senate and gets signed into law. And you, as duly elected legislators, have your own sense of priority. And your priorities, naturally, are shaped by what you know about the wants and the needs of your constituents locally. So your views must be, and they are considered alongside the data-driven shift model. So let me wrap up my portion with a look at the current state highway plan by the numbers. Next slide, please. So on the left side of this slide, you see the totals for the 6-year plan, 2020-2026. 1,204 projects in the plan at an estimated cost of just under $7.7 billion. And on the right side, you'll see the numbers for the biennial plan. 679 projects amounting to just under $2 billion. And the next slide, please. This last slide shows the same totals broken down by project phase: planning, design, right-of-way, utility, and C for, yes, construction, where the highest numbers, of course, occur. The 6-year plan on the left side and the biennium on the right side. And in addition, there is funding in the highway plan for a long list of miscellaneous uses: debt service on the bond, bridge inspection, smaller pavement repairs, navigational lights on bridges, for example, railroad crossing guards, rock slides that occur, emergencies, the list goes on. These are all grouped in the back pages of the highway plan under the rather odd name of the various. And here's your, as I'm sure many of you have this highway plan, just like we keep it real close by. Now, the Z-Various, all the Z-Various projects total to about $568 million in the biennium, and a bit more than $1.4 billion over the all 6 years. So, Mr. Chairman, I hope that we've been able to shed a bit of light on the big picture process of how transportation projects come about and about our involvement with the SHIFT model, the SHIFT program. So I'll be happy to take any questions now before we turn it over to Robin for her part of the presentation. And I may, as I said earlier, I may lean on James Ballinger or on Robin to help me with some of your questions, but happy to take any.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and we're certainly glad to have James Ballinger with us today. I made a comment yesterday of how user-friendly that your cabinet has been with questions. I know Kenny Bishop, and if anybody on the committee don't know who their legislative liaison is, Transportation Cabinet, Kenny Bishop, and he will get you to who you need to get to and get you an answer on any question. And for example, one day this week, Representative Reed asked a question about flex funding, and your Commissioner of Secondary and Rural Roads was very eager to answer that for him. And you probably might even get the question about flex funds. Representative Reed did get his question answered, and we appreciate that. And looking around to see if we have any questions so far. Okay. Co-Chair Santoro, excuse me.
Secretary Gray, very good presentation. I just want to make sure that inside Transportation Department, it wasn't the SHIFT formula, but was used previously and is just recently that our members have been involved in it, which is very good. Several times, some of our members are not around at their local district when these plans are developed. That way, when they come into session and they meet with us, that they do have that opportunity. And we need to keep that dialogue going for our members. Some of them represent 2 or 3 counties, and they don't know what the furthest county away actually needs or wants until it's too late. So I just want to say thank you for keeping this process going, the SHIFT formula. And usually this month, September, I think is the rumor when you start developing. Is that correct information?
Yes. Yeah, we'll start developing.
Okay.
It's really an ongoing process, but it becomes much more robust, yes, now.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. President, and Mr. Co-Chair, thank you.
Mr. Secretary, one note I wanted to throw in on the SHIFT program. As far as legislative involvement at the local level, it would every year we get our notices, and I'd ask you take this in consideration. We get notices while we're in session. Usually those meetings at the local level are held first quarter of the year. And I get several notices about the SHIFT meeting at this area development district or that area development district. And we're in session, and legislators can attend. I don't think that was intentional, but sometimes it seemed like it was, because I've complained about it several times before, and they continue to be in the first quarter of the year. So I ask you on that to to consider that. I don't know that all legislators would show up at those meetings, but at least they would have the opportunity. Right now, it's very difficult for any of us to attend those local meetings.
Yes, sir. Well, we always believe in continuous improvement, and suggestions like that, we'll certainly consider how we might make some adjustments to the process. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. One other question I'd have, we look at the projects by phase and the two-year road plan, the biennial road plan. It's almost $2 billion. And wants and needs that we've asked for. How does that translate into our budget, actual dollars received? Will we get anywhere close to that amount of money to fund those projects, or is that significantly over-programmed?
Well, that's I would characterize it this way. That's it's over-programmed by several $100 million, but that's also not terribly unusual. You know from history that that's been the pattern, that we, in the planning process and in the execution process, we will plan on adjusting. But I think it's important to recognize that we came into this year with about a $2 billion backlog of work. So there was quite a lot of work in last fiscal year, substantially actually more than normal that was contracted. So we're working off that backlog today, and that's put some pressure on us for new projects. But I think you all have seen we've been having several conversations with members on the need in the district for paving projects, for example. So when the virus really caught us and we had to pull the throttle back on projects for a few months, we saw that then in June that vehicle sales, people were buying more cars, and those numbers came back for us. And Robin's going to speak to this. But we've been able to really throttle forward with more letting and more projects. And we can talk about that. We can talk about those numbers anytime. Yes, sir.
Well, I know we're certainly appreciative of the throttling forward. That throttle back was somewhat scary for. We have a lot of calls from constituents about when are they going to pave my road, and a lot of calls from contractors, when are you going to start the bid lettings, and from, city and county officials inquiring about the funds. So look forward to, and I know there's been a lot of projects, a lot of announcements here in the last little bit, and like I said, we certainly appreciate that. So.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would, Robin can, I said in her presentation, our budget director, she'll do some deep dive into that. But I do think it's important to reflect on this pattern of many projects having been led last year. So we're working off those projects. That's why our cash model has been so important that we are very careful about, so that we have enough money in the bank, frankly, to pay our bills on the projects that are already in place. But the good news is we're able to, as I said, and you confirmed, we're able to throttle forward, and we're looking at, in fact, a special letting on October the 9th that has a number of paving projects in it.
Mr. Secretary, I don't see any questions from any of the members, so you did an ample job explaining that, and we certainly thank you. I guess we'll move on to our to Robin Brewer, the Executive Director, Office of Budget and Fiscal Management. Robin, are you with us?
I'm here.
Okay, the floor is yours. For the record, please introduce yourself and please proceed.
Okay, my name is Robin Brewer. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of Budget and Fiscal Management in the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. Do you all have a presentation that I had sent over? Hopefully you have it in front of you.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
we're ready to go on that.
All right. So the first item that I was asked to talk about was road funds to other agencies. So you can actually go on and move to slide 3 in the presentation there. So this is a list that I think at least some of the committee members, or maybe all of you, have probably seen in the past because we have provided this in the past. And so it's basically a list of estimated road funds that go to other agencies outside of the Transportation Cabinet. The list has been updated for estimates for fiscal year 2021. But, you know, again, this isn't really probably an all-inclusive list. It's just what we could come up with. And I won't go through every item on the list with the committee today because it is rather lengthy. But I thought I might touch on some of the larger dollar items on the list. So the first several there, you can see over to the right-hand side, they have a note on them that says they are direct road fund appropriations to those agencies from the enacted executive branch budget bill. So that means that those specific amounts were appropriated with road fund dollars to those agencies in the enacted executive branch budget. So if you go down to, I think it's the second one there, that's about $3.8 million that's appropriated to the Department of Revenue and the Finance and Administration Cabinet, and that's used for their efforts in the collection of the state's road fund revenue. You go down to the next two items on the list. If you add those up, that's approximately $108 million. It's appropriated to the Justice and Public Safety Cabinet for both the Kentucky State Police and commercial vehicle enforcement. That's for their vehicle enforcement efforts on the state's roadways. And if you go down a few more lines, you'll see there's an item there for $5 million that's appropriated to the Energy and Environment Cabinet. And that's for the Kentucky Pride Fund for litter abatement and beautification of roads pursuant to KRS 224.43-505. About halfway down the list, we have approximately $6.8 million that is for rent and electricity for the office building here in Frankfort. And closer down to the bottom there, another item, about $21.6 million is estimated for the Commonwealth of Technology, or COT's cost. And that's for their work and services that they provide to the Transportation Cabinet to assist the Cabinet with achieving its mission. And just another two lines down, the next item, approximately $9.3 million is estimated for fleet charges for the Cabinet's use and maintenance of its approximately 1,800 fleet vehicles that they use across the state. So the estimated total here is about $167 million. That's about 11% of what our current revenue estimate is for fiscal year 2020.
Robin, can I interrupt you there?
Sure.
I always look at these expenditures, $167 million. If I'm correct, that's about 5.5 cents of our gas tax. It would take about 5.5 cents to generate that kind of money. So, you know, we're always concerned about that 6.5 cents we lost at the pump back 5 years ago, and the $200 million that we're losing each year because of the decrease in the gas tax. But as we look at these expenditures, I do have one particular question. There's a lot of these, and I'm sure the secretary, I'm sure you all look at all of your expenditures and go over them with a fine-tooth comb. And like fleet charges, you're always making sure that you're getting the best deal possible, and insurance is, almost $1 million. I'm sure you're making sure that you're looking at all those issues, but one here that kind of jumps out at me is driver's education, about 3/4 of the way down. Colorado State Patrol Family Foundation. And we also have expenditures to University of Kentucky and Eastern Kentucky University. Couldn't one of those two state universities do this driver's education? Or is that something that that's such a great deal we can't get it done anywhere else? Are you familiar with that, Robin?
No, I'm not actually familiar specifically with that particular entity. If I'm not mistaken, I thought that EKU used to provide those services to us. But I'm going to have to get some history on that, and I'll have to get back to you. I'm just not certain on that.
If you don't mind, please do,
Sure.
because that is,
Absolutely.
like I said, that one kind of sticks out, $500,000 going to Colorado.
Absolutely, I'll find out.
Okay, please proceed.
Well, that basically concludes what I was going to talk about on this particular item, unless you had other questions, or if you wanted me to go ahead and move on with the other items.
Senator McDaniel has left the room. I see a lot of these I'd like to see moved over to the general fund, but he would probably disagree with me. But we will take a look at these, because we do get a lot of people that are concerned about these road fund expenditures that goes to other agencies. So we do need to take a real close look at those before we do this next budget. So I won't interrupt you anymore, Robin. Go ahead.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. Okay, well, the next item I think I was asked to talk about was road fund cash management. So you can go ahead and go to slide 5 there in the presentation. So beginning with the enactment of the 2002 biennial budget, the General Assembly established the pre-financing road projects program, authorizing the Cabinet to develop and implement a program to accelerate projects contained in the biennial highway construction plan. The program permitted the Cabinet to initiate work on highway projects in excess of available budget authority by employing a cash flow financing program. In accordance with the General Assembly's ongoing authorization for the program, the Cabinet has used the road fund cash balance to accelerate highway projects. The 2002-2004 biennial budget added the requirement of the Cabinet to maintain a minimum road fund cash management target of $100 million. Prior to fiscal year 2000, the Cabinet managed the highway program on an obligation basis by setting aside the entire cost of a highway project phase at the time work was approved to begin. Typically, highway projects take a number of years to complete. Therefore, a considerable cash balance accumulated in the road fund as project dollars waited to be spent. The road fund cash balance does not represent free, uncommitted funds, but rather funds on deposit until expenses became due over time. Using the cash flow financing approach, the Cabinet has used the road fund cash balance to expedite the start and completion of highway projects. The Cabinet has developed cash management practices and tools to forecast and monitor cash activity on an ongoing basis. The goal is to maximize available resources for the delivery of services while ensuring funds are sufficient to meet current obligations. The legislation requires that the Cabinet ensure funds are available to meet expenditures. The most critical cash management practice in terms of controlling future cash outlays is determining which 6-year highway plan projects are authorized for funding and when work is to begin. Oversight of this process is the responsibility of the Authorization Review Team, or as we call it, ART, and consists of members from various areas of the Cabinet, including the Secretary's Office, the State Highway Engineer's Office, Division of Program Management, and the Office of Budget and Fiscal Management. The group meets regularly projected cash balances, as well as discuss adjustments and assumptions made to the cash model. They also discussed proposed authorizations pertaining to all phases of the six-year highway plan, and they examined funding options in light of known highway system needs, safety concerns, and economic development consequences of funding decisions. Slide 6. So this chart, I believe, again, is something that at least most or all of the committee members have seen before. It is a chart we have provided in the past. This particular one shows historical daily net cash balances in the road fund since July 2018 through August of 2020, as well as projections through December of 2021. So this chart was originally created a few years ago, really to show basically the cyclical nature of our road fund cash balance. It's showing those peaks and valleys throughout the year, because again, that happens throughout the year based on when we have significant cash flow going out the door, and also just the timing of when our road funds are actually deposited. So the cash model itself is, as we've said before, constantly adjusted and changing with basically the more information that we have. So I'd like to mention some of the assumptions that were made in this cash model forecast you see here today. The model does not assume an additional shutdown of any kind due to another surge in COVID-19 cases. It assumes we will meet our enacted road fund revenue estimate fiscal year 2021, and it does not assume any real disruption in cash balances if a federal transportation budget or continuing resolution is not passed timely. So, as the committee knows, the road fund saw a 23.6% decline in the fourth quarter of fiscal year 2020, which resulted in a budget shortfall of $60.3 million. And of course, that was certainly better than the almost $162 million that was originally estimated, but it's still a significant shortfall nonetheless. And so, I'd really like to say if the cabinet had not been, basically quick and proactive to react and begin to take cost reducing measures once the coronavirus began to emerge and healthy at home directives were taken to protect Kentuckians, then this chart today would likely look very different. But fortunately, due to the cabinet's actions and a more favorable revenue forecast than anticipated, we currently are in a situation where we store some fiscal year. I just would like to mention to the committee that our August revenues for the road fund were down 1% compared to last August. Fortunately, year-to-date, overall road funds are up 2.9%, which, as the Secretary mentioned previously, is primarily due to our continued increase that we have seen in our motor vehicle usage tax. Our usage tax was up 10.8% in August compared to last August, and it was up 11.3% year-to-date. But we all know that, that growth can start to taper off as that pent-up demand for the purchase of vehicles grows. Some other areas of the road fund have still not completely recovered or rebounded. For August, our motor fuel tax was still down 4.5% compared to last August, and it was down 2.9% year-to-date. Also, our weight distance tax in August was down 18.1% compared to last August, and it's down 13.7% year-to-date. So the usage tax revenues are obviously helping to stabilize the road fund revenues overall, but it's still early in the fiscal year. Based on year-to-date collections, our road fund revenues must increase 3.6% for the remainder of the fiscal year to meet the enacted revenue estimate for fiscal year 2021. And so that concludes my presentation.
Robin, it looks like is August the typical time where the road fund is the lowest each year?
Yes, it typically is. We usually start to build our cash around January, and it starts to build back up. And the reason for that is in June we have a very significant debt service payment that we have to make for our turnpike bonds. That's usually around 125 million or more. And then we continue to have a lot more cash outflows. July and August we make revenue sharing payments to cities and the county. And then we also have a significant Garvey debt service payment that we also have to make in August. So we have several, a few $100 million that go out the door within a matter of, a few weeks, really. So we have to have that cash filled up every year in order to be able to take that precipitous drop that we see every year.
Back in, notice last year that you say there's a statutory requirement not to drop below 100 million. It looks like we might have violated that a little bit last year in August. That statutory limit of 100 million, is that, I mean, it's etched in stone, it's been there for 18 years. Is that a realistic number, or does that need to be changed as we look, it's been in place for quite a while?
Well, really, I mean, we can drop below 100 million, but we just have to make sure that we have a cash management spending plan in place to basically say that we're going to take certain steps that are needed in order to get our cash balance back up again to the 100 million mark. And when we did drop back in 2019, that actually was for one day. And then we were right back up above 100 million the next day. And so we weren't concerned about that. We knew that was going to happen. But as far as whether 100 million is still a good number, I mean, I personally think yes. I mean, a lot of people think that seems to be very high. When you talk to people, they think 100 million seems like a lot of money. But honestly, in this cabinet, on average, we tend to spend anywhere from $9 to $12 million a day. So if you put it in that perspective, that's not a lot of days of cash that you would have on reserve. And another important point to make here is that our road fund revenue, significant part of our road fund revenue is deposited at the end of the month. That's our motor fuel tax. And that's about half of our revenue. It's not a little over half of our revenue. And that literally gets deposited about the last day of the month. So, we do have to have some cash throughout the month to pay our bills as they come due until we get a significant amount of our revenue that gets deposited at the end of the month. So there's quite a bit of volatility within the month in the cash balance.
I was corrected. I said that was in statute, that but that's in the budget bill, that the 100
Correct.
million, 100
That's
million.
correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Representative Upchurch has a question for you.
Thank you, Robin. Can you refresh my memory on schools? Do they pay the motor fuels tax on for fuel that they use in the school buses, or are they exempt?
To be honest, I don't know the answer to that question. I can certainly try to find out for you.
Yeah, I'd like to figure that out. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Robin, it looks like you did a thorough job explaining all that. I was trying to think if there's something else I need to ask, and I don't. So does that conclude your presentation?
It does. Yes, sir.
Okay, because you were on there, on the list a couple times, so want to make sure that you had everything in. Okay. Senator Parrott has a question. Turn your microphone on so she can hear you.
Robin, can we ask you to give us a copy of what you showed us today in the slides? We don't have it on paper. I don't have it on paper at least. Is there? Okay, I'll get it that way. Thank you.
Robin, thank you for being with us, and we appreciate the work you do. And I guess that, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Robin.
All right, thank you.
Secretary Gray, you're still with us?
Yes, sir.
Okay, do you have any comments for us to end up our?
I just want to say I appreciate all the engagement that the committee and the leadership provides to us. I particularly want to thank you, Mr. Chair, for the shout out you gave Kenny Bishop earlier. We really look at this from the point of view that, in many respects, that our citizens and our constituents as well, and you all are our, in a sense, our customers. And so our responsiveness to your questions is a real test of our ability. And so whenever we get a confirmation that we're doing a pretty good job, we really appreciate it. So, and we want to keep doing that. And that's the spirit that we want to keep approaching things. So thank you.
Okay, Representative Santoro.
Mr. Secretary, I just have a comment and maybe a little bit of a question. You know, nobody expected what was going to happen in February happened, and nobody drove. I know one of your key members is working out of his house, and he's only filled his tank up one time since then. I don't want to mention his name because he doesn't have to drive to Frankfurt. So if we're not driving, we're not buying fuel. Anyway, so since everything happened, we had $70 million more available in revenue than what we predicted. So, Mr. Secretary, do you know what the process, what you're going to do, who's going to determine where this money goes first of this $70 million? Because, you know, we heard $160 million. So I guess we're just looking for what's going to happen to that money that we didn't think we were going to have that we had, or could you comment on that?
Sure, Representative Santoro, Mr. Chairman. Well, the first things first, we have, in a sense, that those funds are working capital for us. If it were a private sector business, we think of it as working capital. So the first is our obligations that Robin discussed in terms of, for example, bonding obligations, and then we have our project obligations, and then the projects that are already underway, so making the payments on those. And then it comes to the opportunity for pushing the throttle forward, like I described earlier, and engaging more projects that are in a short-term, perhaps a short-term spend, and we can still get out the door into this season, and that would be pavement projects. So the other top priority for these funds is, frankly, emergency projects, emergency maintenance projects, and safety projects. And I've discovered that there are those needs which many of you as members recognize because you have them. And so we need to be prepared for those as well. So that's let me say also, let's not forget our priority projects, that our SPP projects, which would actually come in cycle or in sequence after our obligations are paid, our emergency maintenance projects and pavement projects that are in the cycle already are paid, and then we get to our priority projects.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the hard work you all are doing. I know it's trying times, and we're managing, and let's just hope we have a real mild winter.
Mr. Mr. Secretary, is Robin still on with us?
Yes, sir.
Robin, I saw a chart sometime back, and I've looked for it, that goes back to way back, I think it was 2008, 2010, our revenue to the road fund is about the same as it is now. I looked for that chart and couldn't find it. Would you, at sometime in the future, a chart that shows the revenues for, I'd say, the last 10 or 15 years? And more.
Certainly.
Okay, as we go forward, I think it's important that we realize that we're still operating today with the same funds that we had 10 years ago. And probably we've had a little inflation along the way, so a dollar now doesn't buy what a dollar did 10 years ago. And we'd like to keep building roads. My favorite thing, Mr. Secretary, is orange barrels. I love to drive down the road and see orange barrels. There's a construction project is ongoing, so.
There you go.
That's,
Well, thank you, sir. Well, Senator, you mentioned earlier that benchmark of roughly 200 million, that we're roughly $200 million lower just in absolute dollars from where we were, 5 years ago. That's 6.5 cents. And that number, of course, over a few years translates into some really big numbers that we've lost in the opportunity for both maintenance and for new projects, and for federal, and for the matches that we need to generate.
yes. I made the comment, and I was quoted not long ago, that it's $1 billion we've not had into the road fund over the last 5 years. And if you don't know where $1 billion wasn't spent, all you have to do is ride down our roads and you'll see where we did not spend it. I know a lot of roads that I travel are starting to get to that point where they need some attention. So, Mr. Secretary, thank you again. Robin, thank you. And Mr. Ballinger, thank you. And if no further questions, I entertain a motion to adjourn. And we are adjourned. Thank you.